the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom is being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another of my semi-regular podcast. What's the Biggs Idea? I'm Andy Biggs from Arizona's 5th Congressional District, and I have today just an incredible guest. He's become a friend. He's just, I've known of him since before I came to D.C., watched his work for years, and you will have too. His name is John Solomon. He's an award-winning investigative journalist, author, digital media entrepreneur who serves as chief executive officer and editor-in-chief of Just the News. That's justthenews.com. It's one of my go-to places for information. He's covering everything. I don't know when he sleeps, but they're putting stuff out, and you can watch them on their show as well. He and Amanda Head do a great job. Before founding Just the News, John held key reporting and executive roles at Washington Post. I don't know what happened there.
Yes, it was a lapse in judgment.
Yeah, whatever. The Associated Press, Washington Times, Newsweek, The Daily Beast, and The Hill. He worked for 2 decades at the Associated Press, where he became one of the youngest news editors in the cooperative's history at age 22. He rose to become the number 2 executive in the Washington Bureau. His reporting, executive and leadership successes are too numerous to actually name, and that's true. We spend all our time talking about his success. He and his teams have won dozens of awards during 3 decades as a professional journalist, including the prestigious Robert F. Kennedy Excellence in Journalism Award, 3 Society of Professional Journalists Awards for investigative reporting, and during his 2 tours of duty as Times editor, the newspaper twice finished as a Pulitzer finalist. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about this omnibus bill that's going forward. I thought we'd talk about the J6 committee and Liz Cheney. And nobody's paying enough attention, in my opinion, to Benny Thompson, but
I agree.
But we need to be looking at that. And then we'll talk, maybe if we've got some time, about what real journalistic integrity might look like and what we might see instead in the next 4 years. So, John, our friend, the speaker, promised he would never put an omnibus on the floor.
That's right.
So he's doing the best he can to call this omnibus bill a continuing resolution.
It's an omnibus.
He also said he wouldn't do it with less than 24 hours of time to read. So it's been about 16, 18 hours since they gave us this 1,500-page monstrosity. What do you make of this?
It's business as usual in Washington, which is exactly what Republicans promised would not be the case when they took over. And for 2 years, whether under Kevin McCarthy or now under Mike Johnson, the Republicans have failed to meet their promise for the American people. It is business as usual. The lobbyists and special interests won. Regular budget order doesn't exist. Excuses are the only thing that Mike Johnson can offer for why he doesn't follow his own principles. The Mike Johnson I think believes in the principles that Andy Biggs believes in, but he hasn't shown the courage to execute those when he's in a leadership position. And, in baseball, there's an old saying, nice guys finish last. I think Leo DeRozier, the Cubs manager, once said that. Yeah. I think that's what Mike Johnson is doing. He's trying to be a nice guy to all people, and he's not executing on what the American people sent the Republican Congress to do the last 2 years. And he's setting the stage for a bumpy start for the next Congress and the next Trump administration, because this is a giant Christmas tree bill. And if you want to really make yourself popular with the American public, let's just give members of Congress a pay raise in an omnibus bill. That's a great way to send a message. For our failure of the last 2 years, we're going to give ourselves a pay raise. And I know you don't believe in it. I think you're one of the few members that have had the courage regularly to say this isn't what we came to Washington to do, isn't what we promised. But too many of your colleagues in the Republican Party haven't shown the courage that you have to hold the line. And I know they say it's convenience, it's next time, but next time never comes in Washington. It's never come in the 30 years I've been here in Washington, with the exception of the Gingrich Revolution, where they actually did cut spending and balance a budget. But otherwise, Republicans are just as complicitous.
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember hearing someone say he found out that there's two parties in Washington D.C., not the Democrats and Republicans. It's the massive party that wants to keep spending money, and then this small group of party that wants to slow it down, and that's where we are. And
you're right.
And I find it really intriguing. I don't know if you've been seeing this. I'm sure you have. So you got the Doge, which is this thing that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are supposed to be getting after, right? So the question is, when you do this kind of bill, and don't forget that last week when the Doge guys came in there, all these Republicans get up to the microphone. Oh, well, yeah, we're with you. Isn't this kind of a slap in the face?
It is. And Elon Musk saw it as that. I mean, look what he put out just a few minutes ago. Any member of the House or U.S. Senate who votes for this outrageous spending bill deserves to be voted out in 2 years. That's Elon Musk responding to the Congress. Yeah, it makes a mockery of what the American people thought they were getting when they voted this Republican Congress in, and when they voted the next Republican Congress in. Now, maybe business will change, because Donald Trump is pretty stubborn, pretty tough, and I think he may force change next year, but it doesn't send a sense of momentum into change when the last thing this Congress does is exactly what the American people don't want: more spending, no accountability, no regular budget order, and gifts for everybody except the American people.
Yeah, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just got to ask you, I mean, so one of the most embarrassing things for me is, because I didn't realize this was in there until last night, because we didn't get the bill till, last evening.
Yeah.
And I get a text from someone saying, is this right that they've reintroduced the COLA, which is the cost of living provision, which is the pay raise you talk about.
Yeah.
So that's one of the most embarrassing. But there's so many other pernicious things in here. I wondered if you wanted to give us, one or two highlights that you and I were talking about.
The transfer of RFK Stadium to the District of Columbia, so a wealthy guy who runs the Washington Redskins can have a stadium probably that's going to be subsidized by taxpayers down the road. Those are the sort of things that go up and down here. There are, there are unions and workers that apparently didn't pay all their Social Security, but they're going to be made whole on that. Unions have been given 4 years of gifts by the Biden administration. All the union pension funds that were grossly mismanaged were bailed out by PBGC under Joe Biden, and no one's been held accountable. Just the government wrote a check to erase all of that bad mismanagement. So you have all this history that predates it, and you've got the Social Security true ups, I guess is what we would call them, for some of these unions, particularly public.
By the way, that's a $200 billion.
It's a big ticket. It's a huge ticket.
$200 billion. And
it just gets thrown in here. And we, the American people who have to make decisions about whether we're going to buy milk or gas next week because we're tight on bills, they see this reckless spending and $1 trillion of debt every 3 or 4 months rolling up. And they thought, well, was this the change we voted for? And I think the answer is no. And there's no one to hold but the Republican leadership responsible. I know all the Republican leaders. I'm friendly with all of them, but they have provided lip service that wasn't backed up by their actions. And the entire Congress this last 2 years has been a Congress that did little but spoke a lot. And, in fairness, big investigations. Yeah, the Hunter Biden thing got reversed, but FISA reform didn't happen despite your heroic efforts. All the things that the Republicans ran on in the Kevin McCarthy commitment to America, it wasn't much of a commitment because none of it happened. And the moment now will be, can Donald Trump force the Capitol to act the way they promised? And if he can't, the Trump presidency won't be very successful. If he does, there's a moment of 20 or 30-year history that could be changed, but it's going to take some form of leadership that hasn't been exercised by the House Republican leaders or the Senate Republican leaders the last 2 years.
Yeah, See, you're taking us on down the trail of tears, John, because that's
It,
right.
it is sad, though. And listen, there's a cautionary tale just across the pond. Look what just happened to the conservatives in Great Britain. They didn't deliver anything they promised, and they got thrown out in a big way. And Britain is worse for it. I mean,
Yeah.
freedom in Britain is being eroded daily because the liberals are in charge there. But that's a cautionary tale of what could happen in 2026 if Republicans don't start delivering. The one thing I'll say is President Trump seems very determined to deliver it. I suspect he'll deliver it in giant omnibus bills because it's hard to get things through individually. I suspect a large part of the congressional part will be 2 giant bills that'll throw the kitchen sinks together. But after that, if you get all that done and then there's regular order and there are 13 or 12 budget bills passed in 2025, that'll be historic. It'll be good for the public. I wonder if it'll happen. I don't know if it'll happen yet. Maybe you know better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the discussion now is turning to the reconciliation package, which is what you're talking about, these two budget bills that is really the only way you get around the Senate filibuster. Both sides use it. It's statutorily encoded. And so, I'm hopeful there that we can get something done. The debate now is just on the size of these 2 packages. Do you want a real small package focusing solely on a few border issues at first to kind of grease the skids and get going and provide the funding that you know you're going to need for the program? Or do you do more? But, and there's logical debate on both sides. I mean, we haven't done 2 reconciliation bills successfully in 30 years. In
it's
Congress.
pretty hard to do in a dysfunctional Congress.
Yeah.
I think the American people are forgiving of the process if the end result is you deliver on the promises
Exactly
made, promises kept. And I think that's what Donald Trump understands, and he'll create a sense. I think he'll create a sense of urgency that hasn't been in Washington in a very long time. And if you think Donald Trump is demanding, Elon Musk is right behind him, and so you've got these 2 guys that are CEO, get it done, bottom line guys, and maybe they can change the culture. I think American people are betting on that. We'll watch and see if it happens.
Yeah, I hope so. So for people who are watching, you need to know that John is an intuitive, investigative reporter. And one of the things that he's been working on really is taking a look at the House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight, on Oversight's request to formally investigate Liz Cheney. You reported on that recently. I sit on that committee, and one of the issues is Liz Cheney may have tampered with a witness, may have suborned perjury. That's the allegations that you see coming out of like Barry Loudermilk's investigation and others. Comment on that, will you? Tell the audience about that.
In order to create a narrative for the American people that the Democrats wanted, with the assistance of Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, they wanted to paint what happened on January 6th as an insurrection, an armed insurrection to overthrow the U.S. government, which wasn't what happened that day. It was like another BLM protest, except the conservatives were involved in this one, or some conservatives. But they wanted to make it something it wasn't. And the real insurrection was against the facts and truth. There wasn't an insurrection against the government. It was a protest that got out of hand. But they wanted to hijack the truth, and there was an insurrection against truth. And it made us, we were forced to believe, or been led to believe, that Donald Trump reached through a glass window in his beast and commandeered his limousine trying to fight with his Secret Service. That didn't happen. And we were told that the Capitol didn't have any inkling that this was going to happen. That wasn't true. There were enormous warnings that were coming in, and Nancy Pelosi and her leadership team didn't act on them. And the Capitol Police Chief this information was kept from him, down below him, below the people below him. So even he couldn't prepare for it. It's not unlike what I did as a reporter after 9/11. Condi Rice got up on a podium and said, no one envisioned flying planes into a building. Like, that can't be possible. And we proved that all of the elements of the 9/11 conspiracy by the hijackers were on the radar of the CIA and the FBI, and they didn't connect the dots, and they didn't act aggressively, and we suffered a terrible tragedy. Something similar, but much smaller in scale, occurred on January 6th. All the elements of these hooligans coming in, planning to cause trouble, were sitting right in front of them, and nobody acted. They partied up in the holidays and didn't pay attention to it, and they turned down the Prussian offer of the National Guard from the Pentagon.
When you say they turned down, be specific. We
Yeah.
know who turned it down.
Well, the message is conveyed by the Capitol Police, but it actually is delivered by the political masters for Nancy Pelosi, the sergeant at arms. And he didn't like the optics. Optics is not a security word. It's a political term. But they didn't want to look like Donald Trump calling out the National Guard in the summer of 2020 to deal with the BLM riots. So they decided not to protect the Capitol with an obvious resource, and they got overrun that day. And as we saw just a few weeks ago when I got these videotapes, Nancy Pelosi, in the heat of the moment, self-confesses on videotape that they were responsible for the security affairs. We bear responsibility. We should have had the guard here, she told her chief of staff. But to hide that and to create a narrative that would sink Trump's comeback, they created the insurrection narrative. And to have the insurrection narrative, you had to have some key components, including that Donald Trump was so unhinged, he tried to take his limousine to the Capitol and join the insurrection. That was the REO Speedwagon witness of all of American history. I heard it from a friend, heard it from a friend, who heard it from another friend, and none of it was true. And Liz Cheney solicited that testimony from a young White House aide named Cassidy Hutchinson. She did it by going around Cassidy Hutchinson's lawyer, which is a breach of legal ethics. And when she found out what Cassidy Hutchinson might be willing to say, she found out that the Secret Service knew that wasn't true. They were willing to come right away and say, that's not true. She told the Secret Service, we'll get back to you in 5 or 6 months. And she let the American people swallow that false narrative for 5 or 6 months until the 2022 election was over. And then she allowed the Secret Service to come in and tell the real story. That is an insurrection against the truth. It's an insurrection against the common sense of the American people. But Liz Cheney led that with Benny Thompson in the co-chair, because I actually think Liz Cheney drove more of the strategy of the committee than Benny, who wasn't that engaged on a lot of things. And at least for my own reporting, I've been able to detect that. But he let it happen, so he's responsible. And Barry Loudermilk, a man who was falsely accused of leading a reconnaissance mission during that insurrection that didn't happen.
Barry's a congressman from Georgia.
Most people had never heard of him before. He single-handedly just went fact by fact, witness by witness, email by email, text message by text message, and he unraveled the story. He told us that the police left a door open, which most of the people came into the Capitol through. An accident, not intentional. Someone didn't realize that when they pressed the button, it would unlock the door for good and people would come in. He proved that Nancy Pelosi knew that she had the National Guard, didn't use it. And he ultimately proved that Liz Cheney went around the normal protocols for a defense witness or a witness in a congressional proceeding, and not only went around the lawyer to get her to cooperate, but then went and helped her find a new lawyer, which is something a neutral arbiter of a congressional investigation wouldn't do. You wouldn't go get someone, the lawyer, when they're going to be your witness. You let that happen organically. And so yesterday, he issued a report that laid out all the facts, all very carefully researched and attributed, and said that it's time for the FBI to investigate Liz Cheney for not only assaulting the truth, but for tampering with a witness. He believes that the action amounted to tampering, not trying to find the facts, but trying to commandeer a witness's testimony to it in a prearranged narrative. And that's a big moment, because there's going to be a new sheriff at the FBI and a new sheriff at the Justice Department. They might take up this case.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's also one other part that I always found was interesting, is that Cassidy Hutchinson changed her story substantially.
Oh, yes.
So she came in and she gave them a statement under oath. And then she meets with Liz Cheney. They get the new lawyer, and she radically changes her story.
And she does it through an errata sheet, which is supposed to be something that you do technical corrections with, but it's wholesale changes. I think it was Alan Dershowitz saying he had never seen an errata sheet in 60 years of legal work that made such substantive, factual changes to the testimony. But that's a big part of that process that makes Barry Loudermilk say, I think the FBI should look at this as witness tampering. It's a pretty dramatic moment. And to the credit of the news media, which has ignored most of the January 6th unraveling facts, they did cover this seriously yesterday, and there was a lot of coverage of it. And it's a moment for all of us to step back and say, do we really want our Congress in the business of giving us false stories because it was politically beneficial, rather than just giving us the facts and then fight out the politics afterward? And I think that that's something that will resonate into the next year. It's part of the weaponization, and there's an opportunity for all of us, including Congress, to fix some of this in the next term.
Well, now you kind of lead me into our last topic, and we're running short of time. They actually just called votes, John. But so I'm
You
gonna
have business to do, the people's business.
I got people's business to do. So I'm going to ask you, and just take two or 3 minutes. I view you as a professional journalist. You made your career there. You won awards that aren't always just given to conservatives, but are given to just good journalists. And you've been a straight shooter, in my opinion. As you look back over the years, watch how you've done it. What should we see journalistically coming forward? I do see some of the Washington Post and CNN. They're being forced to kind of clean up their act. But what should you see, and what will we probably actually see in about 2 minutes?
I think the most important thing is that the legacy media is not nearly as important as it was 8 years ago. They have lowered their importance to the American people by being wrong so important so often. And there's a new ecosystem where people get their information, and often it's more accurate, and it exists now. And so the legacy media will never have the capabilities it had in 15, 16, and 17 when it misled us. Now, that said, they know that. And I think there is now a slow moment of reassessment. It's not, some of it's forced by litigation and embarrassing lawsuits like the president's settlement with ABC.
Yeah,
some of it.
Will we see more of that? Will we see any
will.
more of that?
We will. There'll be more settlements. There'll be more lawsuits, and there'll be more settlements. And the big one to keep an eye on is the Pulitzer Committee lawsuit that President Trump's been fighting for 2 or 3 years. It's in the shadows right now. There's some explosive evidence that I think will come out soon. But while that's going on, and the free market and the legal system makes some forced corrections, there are journalists who realize that they look back at their last 8-year body of work and they misled the public and they're ashamed of it. And I've seen reporters from CBS News, ABC News, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Washington Post reach out to me in the last few months asking, can we work on things together? Can we go after truth together? And I'm always open to that, as long as they're willing to stick to the truth. I see a moment of rethinking. It won't matter because the legacy media will never hold the power that it had because it squandered it. But I do see some efforts at trying to get at the truth. I had partners when I broke the story about the IRS whistleblowers. I had partners when I broke the story about the Kevin Morris payments subsidizing Hunter Biden. I think we'll see some more collaboration and some recognition. But the path to recovery will never restore the media to the trust it had or the perch it had to influence public dialogue, because they squander that with a lot of false reporting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also, you're right on that's why I was telling you that the media is less trusted than members of Congress.
Yeah, that's right. It's true.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And then the other thing is, people, even in my demographic, are now getting substantial amounts of news, if not most or all of the news, from social media outlets. I mean, I don't know if I call you a social media outlet, but I mean, there's Just the News, Western Journal, there's Daily Caller, Daily Wire, there's Breitbart, there's the Gateway Pundit. I mean, there's you can keep going at Fox News. I mean, I'll even look at CNN now and then to see what's going on from those guys. But it is so broad. Nobody watches CNN anymore, but they still have like 40 million views a day, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on their website. So that's really what you see. There's been a realignment in what Americans, where Americans get their news, which is why you're so successful on justthenews.com.
The British Prime Minister Liz Truss said something profound, former Prime Minister. She said that she couldn't survive 14 weeks in British because there was no one in an alternate media that could get the facts out, but that Donald Trump had benefited from this ecosystem and that Britain needed what America was beginning to create. So for all those news organizations that have stepped into the void, there's envy across the pond now that in other places where censorship and false stories are blossoming, that one day there might be a similar system to do that. And I think that's such a tribute, because we couldn't have done what we did, sir, if it wasn't for lawmakers like you who took the trust to talk to us and give us facts and investigate. And that system is now the envy of other countries who are going through what we went through the last 8 years. Going to be interesting to see if we can spread this new ecosystem to other parts of the world.
Yeah, and so with that, I got to roll out of here and go vote. But I want to tell everybody again and publicly express my gratitude to you, John, not just for being with me on What's the Big Idea, but for your relentless effort to reveal the truth. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I refer you to justthenews.com. He does a great job there, and And you can learn so much. And I learn so much every time I talk to you, John. I really appreciate that.
We learn a lot from you every time you come on and grace us on our show. So we're really grateful for that too, sir.
Thank you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this edition of What's the Big's Idea. And be sure to look for me again on the next edition. If I don't catch you, I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah, and be safe and